Hey guys, it's Jackson here from Titanic Games, and today we're going to start adding a lot more of the functionality for our equipment system. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to go into our character blueprint. Okay, and we've got this simple little pickup event here that just adds to inventory. So we'll open that, and inside of here, what we're going to want to do is let's move this, and basically we want to take our inventory here, and we want to say get inventory panel. Okay, so that'll get the panel on the inventory which contains all of our widgets, and then we want to say clear children. So basically before we create the new inventory, we just need to make sure that we clear out everything that was already there before so that it won't cause any overlap. Okay, so we'll hook that up, and there we go. So next, let's just look over here at the functions that we do have, right? So involving inventory, we have this increase inventory size, we have this has space in inventory function, and then we have this add to inventory function, which we just checked out here, which just adds in the new item, which let's rename this quick to item info, and it just adds it to our inventory. So next what we're going to do is just create all the functions that we'll use. So we'll add a function that we call remove from inventory. We'll create another one here called refresh inventory. Okay. Then we'll add one called add to equipment. We'll add another called remove from equipment. Okay. Then we'll say refresh equipment. And then we're going to add one called update equipment slot. And we'll add two more finally that we'll call attach equipment and unattach equipment. So we've got a lot of functions here, a lot of stuff yet to do before we get everything working. So let's just compile and save, and we're actually just going to go ahead and delete or close all these tabs just until we only have the event graph open. Okay, so basically next let's just follow the kind of logical progression through how this system works. Okay, so it starts off, right, we pick something up right inside of our base item, okay, and it goes through, it checks if we have space, and if we do, then it sends this pickup message which goes to our character and adds it to our inventory. Then inside the inventory, right, it just kind of refreshes the inventory, and that's essentially, this little chunk right here is essentially what we'll do for the refresh inventory function, just a little different. Right, but it does that, right? So it's now added it to the inventory, and now, now what, right? So, well, what we'll do is, on our UI, let's go find our UI. On our UI inventory item, right, we have this function, or we don't have this function yet, but basically we're going to call a function called useItem, right, which will go through and tell our character to use said item. So what we'll do is we'll simply drag off of here, and we'll call the useItem event, or message rather, so untick the context sensitive so you can find it, and it's just this, under BPI inventory, it's the useItem message. Okay, so we'll do that. Okay, and then just double check that in our class settings we are utilizing this, or we are implementing this interface. Okay, otherwise it might not work. So next we'll take our item info and hook it up like that, right? But now before we send this message, we want to do kind of a branch that checks something. And what we want to do, do our branch, and we want to check if our item info, like if we even have any item info. So we'll drag it out here and get it, and we'll right click and say split struct pin. And what we want to check is if our item info class here is not equal to, all right, check context sensitive again. We want to see if it's not equal to a class. Okay, and that class that we want to check if it's not equal to is just null. All right, so basically what this is saying is, if our item info class here is not equal to nothing, meaning it is something, then we will tell our character to use the item. But if it is not equal to, if it is equal to something, if it is not equal to nothing, then it's going to be false, and we're not going to send the event. All right, so it's kind of a weird double negative kind of thing. I mean, if it's easier for you, you could just say equal class, plug that in, and then connect the false. I mean, that works just as well, but this is just the way I did it. All right, so that's all we're going to do. We're just going to check. Okay, and then we're good to go here. So now we can go back to our character, and we'll implement that event. Okay, so we'll right click and say use item. Right, so on event, use item. Right, what are we going to do? Well, first thing that we're going to want to do is remove it from the inventory. Okay, so how we're going to do that, we're going to take our remove from inventory function, drag it out here, and now here it is. Okay, next we'll add an input that we will call, item info, and we'll change this to f item info. Okay, and we'll hook up this item info coming in from the use event. All right, now let's go in here, and now we have this item info. So what are we going to do with it? Well, we're going to break it. Okay, and then we're going to untick everything over here until we only have the item indexed, because what we want to do is take our inventory of our item info arrays, okay, get it, and we're going to say remove index. So we're going to remove a specific index from the array. All right, so we'll plug everything in like that. And that's going to be our remove array function. Okay, so go back to the event graph. So next what we're going to do is we want to drag off of here and break this item info. Okay, now with the item info we can untick again everything here except for our item type. Okay, and we want to do a switch on the item type. Okay, so basically if the item we used is any, we'll do something different based on the item that we used. Okay, so for right now we're just going to ignore these bottom three, but for weapon and armor we're going to do the same thing. Okay, and that thing that we're going to do is we're going to update the equipment slot. So we'll drag this out. Here it is. We'll plug this in like so, and basically this function right here is just going to be responsible for updating what is actually in our equipment UI. Then we're going to call the attach function, which will attach it to our character, and then we're going to actually add an interface later on that will attach it to our live preview. But we'll do that in a little bit. Okay, so next we'll take our item info here again, not break, excuse me. We want to add a reroute node because we're going to move it over here because we need to use it a couple times. So on our update equipment slot, we're going to add a new input called item info, and we'll take this and plug it in like so. Okay, next we'll open this up. So what we're going to do then is we want to break this item info. And now, similar to how in our equipment UI we did a switch on the item slot, we're going to do a similar thing here. All right, so what we're going to do is take this and say switch on E slot type. All right, plug this in like so. Okay, and we'll click the drop down to get all of these. So now we just need to go through and kind of change up what the variables are, or what all the slots are. Okay, so what we'll do first then is we want to get our equipment reference. Okay, so we're going to get it, and we're going to drag off and say is valid. Okay, because you want to check to make sure that this thing is valid before we run the function we're going to do. Okay, so now if it's not valid, right, all we're going to do is say we're going to add it now to our equipment. Okay, and then we are going to call the refresh inventory function. So there we go. Because by adding it, then we want to make sure then we refresh the inventory since it's now been removed from the inventory. Okay, and we did that out here. So technically you could call it in either place. You could call it here or later on, but I'm just doing it in here because it feels a little more logical here. Anyways, so we'll plug the not valids into this. Okay, and now we'll set up these functions. So the first thing we need is an input that will be item info again, and we want to take the item info here and just kind of move it out because we need to use it a couple times, and we'll hook it up like so. All right, just reposition things a little bit. Okay, so there we have that. Now let's go into the add to equipment. So in add to equipment, we're going to do something very similar as with the add to inventory. We're going to take our equipment, say add. So we'll add it like so, and we'll add in this item info. Then after doing that, we want to check if our equipment reference here, we want to get it and say is valid again. Okay, and now if it's valid, we will call the create equipment function from that UI equipment widget. Okay, so we can compile and save that. Now that's good to go. So if we go back to our update equipment, we can now go into refresh inventory. And in here, we are going to get our inventory reference. We want to check if it is valid. All right, we'll hook this up. Then we will get our inventory panel, and we want to clear the children from it. All right, and then lastly, we want to drag out and say create inventory, and that will be it for this function. So just add a little reroute node to make it space out a little better, and we are good to go. Okay, so we'll go back to the update equipment, and now we can do the is valid part. So if it is valid. All right, so if it is valid, we want to do a branch first, and with this branch, we need to check if there is already an item in the slot that we're trying to add it to. Okay, so what we'll do is, since this is the head slot, we want to take our equipment reference and get the head slot. Okay, then we want to take the head slot and we want to get the item info from it. Okay, now from the slot's item info, we need to compare its info to the current info coming in. So we'll drag off and we'll say break. Okay, so this is going to be kind of a lot of stuff, and we can collapse this to a function later on, potentially. So we'll take this and we're just going to leave everything but class. Okay, so we're going to check if this if the current class of our slot here. So we just want to actually compare this to. We want to say, is it equal to nothing, right? So no class. Okay, and then we'll plug that in. And basically, if the item info on the current, this slot here is equal to nothing, then we're just going to go ahead and add that item to the equipment and refresh the inventory. Okay, but now if it isn't, right? If it's not equal to nothing, meaning there is something there, then we need to take what is there, replace it, send it back to the inventory, and then add our new item. Okay, so how we'll do that, we will drag out here and we're going to type remove from inventory. Okay, so if we open this up, this is all it's doing. Okay, oops, sorry, I'm getting lost here. Or rather, no, excuse me, we don't want to remove it from the inventory, we want to add it to the inventory. That's my bad. Add to inventory. Okay, and that one, right, is just kind of coming through, adding it to the inventory and then refreshing. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind. It is refreshing, so we don't need to call refresh inventory. Okay, and then after we do that, then we want to say remove from equipment. Okay, and we'll do this function in a second. Then we're just going to call add to equipment. Now if you remember in this function, right, it adds it and then it just refreshes the equipment. Okay, now for our remove from equipment, we'll open this up and we'll click on it and add a new input, again of type f item info. We will call this item info. Okay, and we are simply going to get our equipment, right? We're going to say remove index, and the index we want to remove is we'll take our item info, we'll break it. All right, now we will go ahead and with this selected untick everything here but the index. Okay, and if you recall, the index here is being set from our create equipment event inside the UI equipment, so we know that it will remove the correct index, so that's good. And that's all we're going to do here. And this is just complaining because that's what it does. And this just doesn't have a value, so don't worry about that. We'll add that right now. So let's just close some of these just to keep ourselves organized. And basically, what we're going to do for these first two is we want to use the slots item info. Okay, so we don't want to use the item info coming in from the, if you remember all the way back here, coming in from the use item. Okay, we want to use the slots item info. because we're transferring it back from the slot into the inventory. Okay, so we'll hook it up like that. I'm just going to add a reroute node just because we need to plug it into here as well. So we'll hook that up, and there we go. All should be good with the world. All right. The only other thing now is that we need to add the item coming in, right? We need to add this item to our equipment. So we'll just go ahead and, create another reroute node, move it way out here. Okay. And we'll drag out and connect it. And I'll add one more just to kind of clean things up again. Okay, so there we have it, right? Basically how this is, working is in the event graph when we use an item, right, it removes it from the inventory first. Okay, then it does a switch depending on what the item slot is. So if it's a weapon or armor, it's going to go and say update the equipment slot. Okay, so we'll update it. All right, and then in here what that's doing is it's basically just making some more space. I like to do this. It's basically then going to switch on the slot type, right? And depending on the slot, it will check if the slot already has something in it. Right? So if it doesn't have anything in it, then it's just going to add it to our equipment normally. But if it does have something in it, it's going to take what's already there in that slot, okay, and it's going to send it back to the inventory, and then it's going to add it to the equipment, or then it's going to add the new one to the equipment. Okay, so you can hit compile, save, and that error will go away. Now, obviously, this isn't very pretty to look at. Right, and we might think, hey, we're going to use this multiple times, so let's collapse it to a function. And you certainly could do that, right? You could take all this right here, this chunk, okay, right click, collapse it to a function. But one thing I just want to point out is that since sometimes we might be calling this function when the equipment reference here is not valid, all right, sometimes there's just going to be little errors that will get generated in the editor because of the fact that this isn't valid, right? Even though we're running an is valid check, we still have no way to really check, if this branch is true, because we don't know that this is valid, so we can't technically get the head slot. So to kind of counteract that, you can leave it out here in the graph, and it'll be fine. But if you don't care about the error that might show up, I mean, the game still runs, it still works. It's just like an error that shows up. So you can totally just collapse it to a function and then reiterate over all the different slots. But I'm just going to do that outside of the function just because I don't like having errors show up. So yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and tighten everything up. Okay, just kind of scooch it all in. There we go. All right, so I'll come back in a second when I've tightened it up. All right, so here's what I've done, right? I just kind of compacted everything, and you can certainly do this as well. Or, of course, like I've mentioned before, take all this stuff, right? Right-click, collapse to a function, and then you can reiterate on it. So really for the reiteration, okay, all we're going to do is for each different slot, we're literally just going to change this variable right here. So you can just go ahead and drag off of the equipment slot for each one and say torso, for the torso. So we'll just do that really quick just to show you how you can reiterate. So take everything you've got here, right? Hold Control-C, Control-V, paste it. Now, of course, it's not going to be pretty at all. So that's just kind of a side effect. But we'll hook this up to here, okay? And now, this slot, right, we will say get torso slot, plug it in, and now the torso slot's set up. So I'll just do it one more time. Okay. And this slot will be the, gotta plug that in. Okay, for the torso. Now we'll plug this in for the arms, and this is going to be the get arms slot. Okay. So, everything, all the code is still the same. We're just changing the slot. Okay, and we're changing the slot based on whatever slot type it is. Okay, so go ahead, take all of this, right, and just copy and paste and keep going. Okay, and I'll be back in a sec. All right, hey guys, so now that you've gotten that done, you should have something like this. Okay, so again, each slot here is going out. Okay, if you follow the line, it's going to set its associated slot. okay, then just make sure that you're passing through the correct variables here, the correct infos, because they are the same color, so it couldn't get confusing. And just so just make sure that this last add to equipment and this add to equipment here are both coming from the item info reroute node here. Okay, so later on, when you're coming down the line, make sure that you just continue to connect the right item infos up. Otherwise, you could get tripped up, and there might be some issues. So anyways, yep, go all the way down, right? Add all your slots, change the slot depending on which slot it is, and you should be golden. All right. So next, we will go back to the event graph. So if we want, we can go ahead and test this out. All right. So I'm just going to go back to the content browser really quick and check out this item. Okay. So we'll open it up and just see where it's supposed to go. Right. And if we recall, we changed its item slot here to primary right hand. Okay. So it should, if everything works, go to the right hand slot. So let's press play really quick and hit E, and it should go up there when we go at it. So let's press F, we've picked it up, hit I, E, now we should click it and it should go over here. So okay, it's not working. One sec, I think I might know what the problem is. Let's go to our UI really quick, our UI inventory. Okay, and I think the problem is just that, yep, there it is. Okay, so remember when we added the new things to our item info, we just didn't hook these up. So we'll hook up item slot because we need to make sure that we pass that info through. Then we'll go in here and just make sure that everything's okay, and it looks like it is. Everything's fine. So now we should be able to try this out, and it should work. So we'll add the item. If we click it, it transports it over here. So fantastic, right? And that's just a little debug thing I had in there. You can ignore that. But now we need a way to transfer it back. Okay, so we'll do that really quick, and then in the next video we'll focus on actually adding the item to our character. Okay, so let's do that really quick then. So what we're going to do is we'll just ignore this attach equipment for now. Okay, and what we're going to do is under event use, we're going to right click and type event unuse. Okay, so this unuse item, right, we're going to kind of do the opposite here. We're going to say, instead of remove from inventory, we're going to say remove from equipment. Okay, we'll hook that up. Next we'll say add to equipment, or not equipment, but inventory. Okay, and then we'll say refresh equipment. And we could do that before. That would probably make more logical sense, but whatever. And then finally we will say unattach equipment. So this will be an event that kind of comes into play later on once we implement the attach one as well, but we'll just have it there for now. So for this add to inventory, what we want to add is this info coming in. So we'll add it like that. All right, and now we just need to have something that calls this event. So let's go ahead and go find in our UI folder our UI equipment slot. So we'll open that up and we'll go to the graph, and we're going to go to class settings and implement the BPI inventory. Okay, so now we have those functions available to us. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our button here, and we're going to say on clicked. Okay, now similar to how we did the UI inventory item, right? We're going to need to check just to make sure that our the class isn't valid, right? Because we don't want to do anything otherwise. And then after that, we want to check if we have space in our inventory, all right? Because if we don't have space in our inventory, then we're not going to want to be able to, unequip something. All right. So we'll go ahead and get our item info. Oh, my bad. So we'll get it, right click, split it, and then we want to say, is this item info class not equal to nothing? Okay. So basically, if it's not equal to nothing, meaning it is something, then we'll continue on, and what we'll do is we'll cast to our character as our get player character, like using our get player character, I mean. And now that we've cast to our character, we can get that has space in inventory function. And we'll do a branch again. And basically, if that returns true, right, then we can call the unuse item. So we'll go over here and say we'll untick context sensitive and say unuse item. Okay, so it asks for a target and an item info. So the target will be our third-person character. You can add some reroute nodes. Okay, and then the item info that we want to pass through is our items info. So we'll get that and plug it in like so. Now we have this empty the slot function. Okay, so basically once we've sent this message, then we're going to want to empty the slot. So if we go inside, you can see, right, it goes through, it sets the text back to its and the button style back to its defaults, and then it wipes out any remaining trace of the the item info. Okay, so we'll go back to the event graph, and we're simply going to drag that out and plug it in like so. So it should look something like this for you. Okay, going through, fantastic, awesome. Okay. Now we can go back to our character really quick, just make sure everything's all right here. And if we open up this refresh equipment, we haven't actually done anything in it, so let's go ahead and do that. And really all we're going to do is we want to get our equipment reference here, and we're going to call the create equipment function. Okay, and then that's really all we need to do. You could add a return node if you wanted, but I mean it's not necessary. So we will leave it like that, and let's go ahead and try this out. So if we press play, right, here I am, I can go pick something up. Now if I hit I, it shows my inventory, there it is, right, and I can also go pick up other things if I want, and it populates. If I hit E, right, we now see our equipment, and basically if we click it, it'll add it. Okay, now if we click it again, it should remove it. And looks like it worked. Fantastic. So now let's say we add it again, right? And now if two items are in the same, or if an item that you add is in the same slot, right, there's already something there, then it should flip-flop and kind of replace it. So let's try that. It looks like it worked, right? So it replaced it and sent it back where it belongs. Okay, and then we can still remove it and everything's fine. And then of course when you get rid of everything, it's still gonna work and show up the way it should. So, and then while one's closed, you can still remove and they'll show up in the right place. So something kind of cool that you can do. So yeah, that's all that we're going to do then in this video. In the next one, we'll actually look at attaching the weapons and such, and then we should be pretty much done with our equipment system. So with that, thank you for watching. I hope you found this helpful, and if you like the videos, like or subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.